Better Buildings for Humans is powered by Advanced Glazings, makers of the Solera line of products. Solera is the leading glass glazing made specifically for architectural daylighting and with extreme insulation performance. Learn more at advancedglazings.com.
Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the Better Buildings for Humans podcast. I'm your host, Joe Menchefski, and this is the show where we take a look at the impact that the built environment has on our health, our wellness, our productivity, and our just general joy of being alive. And of course, we always talk about sustainable design as well. And actually, this isn't this week's podcast. This is a very special episode outside of our regular programming that I'm very excited about. I want to introduce you to Jon Phillips. Jon, welcome to the show.
Big fan, long-time listener. Pleasure to be here, Joe.
It's wonderful to have you. So for background, Jon and I work together. Jon is the CEO of PhillComm Communications, which it's described as an emerging industries PR firm. And Jon and I have worked together since the beginning of this show. He's one of the people that helped us get it off the ground, and he does a lot of work with advanced glazings as well. Now, and the reason I wanted to have him on the show is that he took the plunge recently, and he brought himself into the world of architectural daylighting by bringing daylight into his own home, this new home that he built in Savannah, Georgia. So Jon, why don't we start, before we get into the questions, just tell us a little bit about yourself, about PhillComm, and about your decision to bring light into your home.
Yeah, great. Well, again, wonderful to be here. So yeah, I'm the CEO of a PR firm, PhillComm Global. We're a leading emerging industries public relations firm. So we play in a lot of hyper growth spaces. Advanced glazings obviously is at the tip of the spear of a lot of stuff that speaks to us, right? Sustainability and patented technology, and they're a category leader. So it's very natural that we work with advanced glazings for years now, which has been really a pleasure. We also work with several other companies that advanced glazings ownership is involved with in other fields. Again, hyper nascent, very emerging spaces, open source computing, aerospace, etc. Yeah, so that's PhillComm in a nutshell. We're a New York City based firm, but in 2020, this was like peak COVID New York City. I had been working full time out of my apartment once everything got very heavily shut down. During lockdown, I'd been like 8 months into just apartment work life, hardcore, not going anywhere. And I was like, man, I got to get an ancillary work prison to spread my wings a little bit. So I looked at a bunch of different kind of options. I'd always been a fan of Savannah, bought the house in Savannah in 2020 with the idea of it being a getaway to just another place to work remotely from. And I also create music. I'm a creative person. So we have that in common, Joe. We can talk a little bit about that on the show. So my workspace here, where the Solera Reserve is that we'll talk about, is also a studio, as well as my home office. I'm in this space now in Savannah. So yeah, bought the house in 2020, and then it just quickly went from a back and forth between Savannah and New York thing. My wife and I would, come down here, do 2 weeks, do 3 weeks, and, back to our apartment on the Upper East Side. We quickly just fell in love with Savannah, and as we looked at starting a family and just where do we really want to be, we transitioned actually the headquarters of the business and also our, full-time residence away from the Upper East Side and here to Savannah. So we're here full-time now. Fast forward, we have 2 kids now, 2 little boys. And so this space that I'm in here that we'll talk about is very much, brain center of the agency for me. And then also, my creative workspace as well. So, I'll leave it there.
Oh, very cool. All right. Well, so let's dive right into the workspace. You mentioned being a musician and, of course, your work with PhillComm. Let's talk about how the two sort of overlap, how they come together, how they influence each other, and how that sort of, created challenges for you in terms of, designing the space that gave you maximum comfort, maximum inspiration, and comfort and, I'll say efficiency in your workflow.
Yeah, and I realize I'd kind of connect the dot on your last question on how we got the Solera in here and all that. So I used to be, when we would be in Savannah before it became our full-time home, I had a recording studio and office situation going in the main house, which I'm not in now. I'm in a freestanding building that's about 800 square feet and has the studio upstairs above a kind of pool house space below. And this building is in our backyard where there's a pool. So, yeah, I used to be in a dark, dim cave of a back bedroom where, of course, being in Savannah, curtains are drawn all day during the day. You need to be on a screen or multiple screens. You've obviously got glare, you've got a scorching, violent sun, as Doug Milburn would say, that we need to tame or harness or put to work for us and turn into our friend and not the violent enemy. But that was my situation. I was, blinds or curtains drawn all day, packed into a back bedroom that had my vocal booth and tons of guitars and analog outboard gear and, you know, a DAW and a workstation for both the agency and for the creative stuff that I do at nights and on the weekends. So I worked with an architect that'd be great to have on this show, Sanders Architecture, Gary Sanders and Scott Trowell. We worked with them. We worked with the builder here, Alaire, to conceive this outbuilding that we knew we would need, especially with having the kids. Just had to have a proper workspace for the both sides that we've talked about. So, yeah, we basically settled on a situation where the downstairs of this building would be sort of the wet, dry room, sort of like pool house kind of vibe. And there's a kitchen, there's a fridge, there's a bathroom down there. And then up the stairs is this total, dedicated space that's now my office. So I knew that I wanted to take advantage. When we got into this, had been a ways into working with AGL, and I'd already seen the light on Solera, become, a fan for life.
No pun intended.
Yeah, pun intended. So I knew I wanted to get, Solera into the space. And this is before we had started talking, just for your listeners, this is before Advanced Glazings was certain that it was ready to take the leap into the high-end residential market where we are now with Solera Reserve. I'm sure your listeners are aware some time ago we